Hey, this is Joe from Presonus. Today we'll answer the question, what is solo safe? I got this question from my friend Ben, who recently switched to Studio One, and you may have noticed this as well. If you're inside a mix session and you hover your mouse over the solo button, it says solo, but it also says solo safe, use shift. So if you hold down shift and click that, what happens? Well, aside from it turning a really cool shade of green, it's doing something called solo safe. Solo safe is the idea that normal way solo works, if I solo my kick drum track, it mutes every other track, right? So I'm only hearing the kick. And I could do the kick as well as the overheads if I just want to hear those two. I press both of those solo buttons. Now I'm hearing just those and nothing else. Okay, that's the idea of solo. There are situations, and it's only a handful of situations for me personally, but maybe you'll have a workflow where you use this more. There are situations where you want to hear a particular track no matter what else is soloed. So I'll get back to that in a second. First, one of the reasons I'm doing this video is mostly to kind of brag on Studio One, because in other systems I've used, I was a Pro Tools guy for a number of years, solo safe was a lot more important because the system itself wasn't all that helpful and wasn't super intuitive when it came to soloing. For example, I've got this overhead track and it's routed to the drums bus. Well, in some systems, if you just have it default a track and a bus and you hit solo on the track, that bus does not open up. So you hit solo on overheads and hit play and it sounds like this. You got nothing because in the way that works, you press solo on a track and it mutes every other track in the session. And the only way to have the drum bus open up to let the sound through was to do this, was to solo safe that track. And in Pro Tools, it was option click or shift click, something like that. And it would do kind of the same thing. It would gray out the solo button so that when I solo the drums, when I solo the overheads, the drums bus does not get muted so I can actually hear it, okay? So the thing about Studio One that I love is while this one isn't showing as solo safe, it essentially acts that way because that's how we expect it to work. If I want to listen to the kick drum and I hit solo on the kick drum, guess what? We hear the kick drum because look, this bus knows that something feeding into it has been soloed. Common sense tells me if it's been soloed, the person probably wants to hear it, so let's let it through. That's how Studio One works. And the flip side, if you've worked in other DAWs where you want to listen to all the drums and they're going through a drum bus, you got to do this number. I have seen tutorial videos where people literally take that, 8 seconds, probably not that long, to go through and solo each piece of the drum kit, or they create a group for the drums and then they can solo all the drums. And it's just a lot of work that's just unnecessary. Instead, Studio One just lets you press the solo button on the bus and it's smart. It knows it's going to go back and solo everything feeding into that bus. So I don't have to do all this extra work for something that really doesn't need to be extra work. So bragging on Studio One, it makes it almost to where solo safe isn't really even necessary because of the way it works. But there are a couple of situations where you'll want it. Let's say, for example, I want to hear my overheads, and I just want to hear how each individual track sounds against the overheads. I could solo the overheads, and I could find the track I want to listen to with it, like the snare drum, solo that, and then unsolo it and go solo the others. But if I want to do a significant amount of mixing, let's say I've got my overhead sound and now I want to mix the other things and I don't want to move my faders up and down, I could solo safe the overheads for a moment. And then when I go solo the kick drum, I'm hearing kick and overheads. Fun fact, if you hold down Option while you're clicking different tracks, it will deselect the previous one and select the current one. So now I can hear the top snare with the overheads. I can hear bottom snare with the overheads, and I haven't had to do excessive clicking. It's really just one click, and because this one is solo safe, it's always going to play. So that's kind of the main scenario where I will occasionally use solo safe, is just to let something ignore the solo button for a few minutes so I can listen to some other things in context of that one thing. A few other scenarios. There was a season where I was really into mixing down and printing that mix down onto a stereo track, so kind of recording my mix back in real time. To do that, I always needed to be monitoring through that specific track. So I'd have a track like this, and it would be routed to my main output or a separate output, I can't remember, but it would be record enabled. It would have monitoring enabled so I could hear what's coming through it. But check out what happens. If my mix is coming out of Studio One, maybe it's going out through a piece of analog bus processing, right? An analog compressor, and then coming back into this channel to be recorded. What happens when I want to solo the overhead? Well, I hit solo and check it out. It muted this mix track, which means it would mute what I'm hearing. So the other option is to solo safe this particular track. So when I solo something else, that track stays open and I can hear what's happening. So it's more of a useful thing to have depending on your workflow. You may never use this, you may use it all the time, but I wanted you to see it there. One other application, if I want to put a reverb on this drum kit, and I want to use a send and return, if I drag an effects chain into that section, you can see effects chains automatically have solo safe turned on, which means when I solo the drums, that reverb is still audible. Okay, but if there was a reason, maybe perhaps I don't want to hear that, maybe this is some sort of distorted drum sound I don't want to hear when I solo the drums, I can just shift click to turn solo safe off, and when I solo the drums, we don't hear the reverb. It has been muted because now it's not solo safe. But again, Studio One's smart and it knows you probably want your effects sends to be solo safed, so it solo safes them anyway. And the same holds true in reverse. If I hit solo on my drum reverb, I'm going to hear that reverb, and I'm also going to hear it's going to open up anything that is sending to that drum reverb, so I can hear if I've got drums, guitars, and vocals going to the same reverb. If I just hit solo on the reverb chain, I will hear all those tracks in the reverb, just the reverb by itself. Which again, that's not really a function of solo safe, that's a function of the killer coding that went into Studio One, which is the kind of stuff I'm showing you today, was really influential in me deciding to use Studio One more and more. I didn't set out to switch to Studio One, I just used it a little bit, and little things like this, I said, wow, that is so intuitive, that makes me so much faster. It feels like, you know how if you shop on Amazon, there's a sense of, I've never talked to an Amazon employee, I've never had to have a one-on-one interaction, I don't think, with them, but I feel towards Amazon that they do good customer service. Even though it's a computer system that's handling everything, it was built by people that seem to care that I'm happy with whatever I'm doing with Amazon, right? Same with Studio One. I had this feeling of like, these guys and girls get me. They built this for me, and it's super handy. Again, this isn't the flashiest thing, right? I've lost probably most people who are watching this video by this point because it's not super exciting and flashy, but boy, is it helpful. And one of the many reasons I switched to Studio One, and I just can't see myself ever going back. So, thanks for watching this video. If you like Studio One, you want to learn more, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Go looking through the recent videos. Over the last year, we have put out some amazing Studio One videos. And if you want even more in-depth videos on how to use Studio One and just other like recording and production tips and tricks and techniques and strategies and masterclasses, you should consider becoming a Presonus Sphere member. You can check that out on our website. It gets you Studio One, also gets you access to all this custom content that's just for Sphere members. Check it out. Either way, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.